The problem with so many weight loss strategies is that it puts you against your own hunger, and hunger always wins. You have to have a weight loss journey that doesn't have hunger being a constant feature. Because if you're imagining this long walk to shrinking my fat cells to what this guy wanted of almost 35 total pounds, I think is what he's going for. If you're carrying hunger, it's like a bag. It's like luggage that you're dragging along on this journey, the chains that you're dragging that are going to make it almost impossible for you to get there.
This sounds almost counterintuitive because when people hear that you're not going to have sugar, they assume that you're therefore going to have loads of cravings for it.
Mm-hmm.
But the remarkable thing I discovered the first time I went on a low-carb / keto diet is I was walking through this mall in Cape Town where I live sometimes, and I saw this concession stand for like cinnamon rolls. Ugh. And I thought to myself, like, I've not had sugar I've not had a high sugar diet now for a couple of weeks. I'll just go look at it and see how I feel. And I walked over and looked down at it, at a food I would absolutely love and my mouth would water just thinking about it. I looked down at it and I had the emotional urge to buy one was completely gone. And it's hard to explain. Mm-hmm. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, you were able to just look at it and shrug your shoulders.
I felt nothing.
Yeah.
And I found that really fascinating that I had no urge, no craving, no desire to buy the cinnamon roll.
Yeah.
And it had vanished.
Well, this is one of the things where I think the future of, as ketone research in humans continues to evolve, there's already evidence showing profound, you can use a ketogenic diet to help people with eating disorders. There are published case studies on this. And I think a part of it is when the brain is so nourished and consistently nourished
by ketones,
the brain reaches this new level of indifference to what it knows might be harmful. And that's, in the midst of that answer, that's kind of loaded, where if you're on a ketogenic diet, the beauty is fuel is stable. Ketones are stable. Even glucose is stable. You're avoiding the massive volatility of glucose. And as much as so much of the glucose-centric view is only worried about the high glucose is harmful. That it can induce the glycation of molecules throughout the body, where the glucose is literally binding things and disrupting their function, proteins, fats. So glucose is harmful, but so too is the volatility of the glucose, where it's really high, then it's really low, and then it's really high again. That is a roller coaster of energy for the brain, where you're force feeding the brain all this glucose, and now you're depriving it. It's like a form of abuse on the brain. But when it's a ketogenic diet, it is stable, consistent energy. And so it's not surprising to me that people find they're able to resist cravings better because the brain is able to say to the rest of the body, no, we don't need that. We're doing fine. We got energy.
What about the heart?
Oh my gosh, that's a brilliant question. So I would say the brain is number one tissue that thrives on ketones, and I'd actually put the heart as number two. There is a lot of great research. I would refer people to Gary Lopachuk's work and others that I just don't know personally, but I know him. He's at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, and he has found, and others, so I'm going to synthesize their work collectively, that when a person's experiencing heart failure, it's a combination of variables where the heart may not be able to contract well enough to eject the blood. It has to work a lot harder for every pump. In that case, they have found that the heart will shift its fuel to start relying on ketones to improve its function. But there was a paper just published this year looking at a different form of beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is the main ketone. Whenever I've been saying ketone, I've been thinking of the molecule beta-hydroxybutyrate. When the liver makes BHB, or beta-hydroxybutyrate, it actually comes in two forms that are mirror opposites of each other in structure. So the way they're built, it's referred to as DBHB or LBHB. So in heart failure, the heart muscle itself, like the brain, starts relying a lot on DBHB as its fuel. Then you would say, that begs the question, well, what about the L? This paper that was just found used a pig heart model, which is actually shockingly close to human anatomy. So it's a pretty good corollary. Here, they found that with LBHB infused into the cardiovascular system of the pigs,
which is ketones,
which is a different form of the ketone that the liver makes. Yeah, so the liver's making two types of BHB, DBHB and LBHB. And when they perfused the cardiovascular system with L-BHB, they found that the what's called ejection fraction, so the amount of blood coming out of the left ventricle, which is the part of the heart that's beating blood everywhere. So with L-BHB, they found that the heart was able to eject 40% more blood for every beat. But now you would say, well, it's just because you're making the heart work harder. No, it was not at all an effect of the heart itself. It was because all of the great arteries, like the aorta, right out of the left ventricle will come the aorta, which is the main avenue for moving blood everywhere. The aorta expanded and all of the great vessels enlarged so much that the heart was now able to beat out 40% more blood with every single beat. So when it comes to someone with heart failure, I think they should be among the most interested in testing out the effects of ketones. Even as a personal note, I tend to be kind of high anxiety, high performance, I'm always thinking of something. No surprise that and I don't sleep particularly great. And so no surprise that I sometimes have higher blood pressure. I one time measured my blood pressure on I went into my dentist, and the dentist has now started measuring blood pressure. It was 139 over 90 something, and I had never been that high. I couldn't believe it. I'm such a healthy bloke. How on earth is my blood pressure this high? And I thought, well, I'm kind of sleep deprived. I've had maybe a little too much caffeine that morning or whatever. But it was a concern. And over the next few days, my blood pressure continued to be higher than it had ever been. And of course, I'm getting old enough that I think these things start to matter. I took a shot as an experiment, seeing this paper that had just been published in 2025, I took a few grams worth of L-BHB. I drank it. And within about an hour, my blood pressure was like 110 over 70. So it had this, now that's anecdotal, it's an N of 1, maybe I just calmed down enough, but I saw an almost immediate reduction in my blood pressure. And it could be because of what they found, which is that all of the vessels that the heart is beating into, they expanded. And so with every beat of the heart was able to eject more blood. And the wider a blood vessel gets, of course, the lower the pressure is. And so that could be the mechanism that explained, in my case, why my blood pressure got fixed so quickly.
How did you drink that?
Yeah. So there are a few different ways. As much as we've been focusing on endogenous ketones, so I'm pointing to my liver, but here's the liver. So when a person is in a ketogenic state, they're making their own ketones. We would use the word endogenous ketogenesis, or they're making ketones in their own body. But it's no surprise that the benefits of ketones are getting so extensive that now there are companies that are enterprising individuals that are finding ways to get into ketosis without having the rigor of a ketogenic diet. And so you can drink ketones. And that comes in a few different forms, of course. The form I'm talking about is just straight BHB in its two versions. You can get it in either version, DBHB or LBHB. So that's just you consuming it in the way your liver makes it.
If you looked in my kitchen cupboard over there, you'd probably see, frankly, about 100 different ketone products. Obviously, some of them are the same, but there's like 100 different units of ketone products. And here is my ketone reader, which is where I prick my finger frequently.
In fact, you'll be delighted once you get one. Nowadays, they make them attachable.
Really?
Yeah, so
What?
Ketones are so easy to measure, not unlike glucose, that just like people have continuous glucose monitors, now in Europe, you can get continuous ketone monitors.
From where?
Next time you're in the UK, get them. You can't get them here yet. They're not FDA approved, but there was a company out of Germany that sent me one called SciBio, SIBIO. And you can just strap it on and look at your phone, and it's giving you continuous readings.
Damn.
Yeah, it's very, very
That is
interesting.
incredible. I'm literally going to buy that ASAP. But before I get that, I've been using this little ketone reader here, which I have no affiliation to at all, and pricking my finger every single day to see my ketone levels when I'm in a ketogenic state.
Yep.
You talked about exogenous ketones there.
Yes.
I have a bunch of different exogenous ketone products here. I know some people use ketone salts.
Yep.
I have 2 different ketone brands here.
Yes. Yeah, so there are different forms. You have 2 different forms here, and you mentioned one that ought to be described because that actually is the type of ketone I was just talking about. So ketone IQ is a ketone precursor where it's a molecule called 1,3-butanediol that will come to the liver, then the liver will metabolize it to a large degree into BHB, the main ketone that we're talking about. And that is the ketone that people want. Then the other one, this is an ester. An ester bond is a molecule that has a chemical bond that is broken when you eat it through enzymes. So you digest that, where it's 1 part BHB, the straight real ketone, and then it's 1 part 1,3-butanediol, which is the same precursor, the ketone precursor in ketone IQ. And so those are 2 of the 3 forms, well, maybe 4 forms. And then the other 2 are straight BHB, where it's either a BHB salt, where the BHB molecule is bound to a sodium or a calcium or a potassium. And you can buy those in the D or the L form. Or nowadays, it's the straight acid, what's called a BHB acid, where it doesn't have any of the electrolytes in it, where you can get, that's what I was referring to a moment ago. When I lowered my blood pressure, I took a straight shot of L-BHB, and you can get that in D and L forms as well.
Okay, so I've just taken a shot of ketone IQ.
Yep, so that's 1,3-butanediol, and you taste it, right? It has a particular kind of kick because it's an alcohol molecule that, you feel it, like it's sort of like taking a little shot. But your liver will take that in, and then over the next couple hours, it will start converting it to varying degrees into BHB.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly do my blood ketone levels now, and we will see if in 10 minutes time, let's do 10, 20 minutes time, there are ketones flowing in my blood. So I've pricked my finger, I've put a little bit of blood on this little ketone sensor here, and it says that my blood ketone levels are currently 0.3.
Yep. Yeah.
So can you describe for me, now that I've just had a shot of Ketone IQ, which by the way,
Yep.
I am affiliated with, I'm an investor in the company, but that's why I brought a variety of different brands.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what's going on inside my body now that I've just had 1 shot of that?
Yes. So now your body is taking in that main molecule of ketone IQ, which is called 1,3-butanediol, and it's going to get absorbed from your guts into your blood, and then from your guts, it's going to go to your liver, and then the liver will pull in that molecule and rearrange it into BHB, and then release that into the blood.
Which is ketones.
Which is key. It will turn it into BHB, the ketone. Yep. And now again, there are different forms that you can take, whether it's the straight 1,3-butanediol, or whether it's an ester.
And what's happening from there? So it's now in my blood. What's happening then?
Yeah, so now, once the BHB's in the blood, anytime BHB's in the blood, it is both fuel and a signaling molecule. And that last part is often overlooked. We've been, over the course of this discussion, talking a lot about, or I've been referring to the fact that it's a fuel for any cell with mitochondria, which is everything but red blood cells. Red blood cells are the only cells with no mitochondria. But every other cell of the body will take in BHB, the main ketone, and use it for fuel. Every single cell of the body, and do so gladly. And it's important to compare the BHB, the ketone, against glucose. In many of the biggest tissues of the body, like the muscle or the fat or even the heart, glucose can't just come in. It needs an escort, if you will, or it needs permission, and that's insulin. So there's this regulating step. There's this checkpoint where insulin can say, all right, you can come in, or not because I'm insulin resistant, or there's not enough insulin, or whatever. Ketones have no such regulation. They just come in. If the cell has mitochondria, the ketone's going in. So that's one effect, where the ketone is metabolized as a fuel, giving the cell literal energy. Number 2 is the fact that the BHB can bind to the cell, and there are receptors on cells that will sense the BHB, then the BHB will tell it to do something.
The ketone.
Yeah. So it's which is really, really unique, where you have something that is both a calorie source, an energy source, and it acts like a hormone, where it tells cells, that's the signaling effect, where it tells cells to do something. Like a moment ago, I'd mentioned how LBHB is capable of expanding the great blood vessels in the body. Well, in that regard, it's acting as a signaling molecule and increasing the production of nitric oxide, which is a great vasodilator. All these guys that are taking nitric oxide drugs like Cialis, for whether it's erectile function, or nowadays guys are taking it to have better blood flow and perform in the gym and have a better workout. Well, LBHB might be kind of the way forward, where if you can signal something else but get the same effect without the consequences or the side effects that you get from Cialis, then that might be one of the strategies and use of LBHB in the future.
So that's been about 5 or 10 minutes, and my blood ketone levels are now at 0.5. and they're continuing to climb just from one shot of ketone IQ. Some people ask me about sex differences in the ketogenic diet or a low-carb diet generally. Some people are concerned that low-carb diets or ketogenic diets are especially useful for men, but might have a different set of complications for women. And we did have a female expert debate on the show where I asked about the ketogenic diet for women, and the sort of consensus was that it should be treated differently for women.
Yeah. I remember I tuned into that, and I respect it tremendously. I really appreciate the view that a lot of these gals have advocated for, which is that women are not just small men. The differences between male and female, of course, are enormous. That doesn't mean there are differences in everything. So women are very unique when it comes to hormones. Women experience a rhythm of hormones that there is no equivalent in men because of the reproductive burden, if you will, or responsibility that a woman has, where she will see changes in hormones that can reach thousands of times differences. Like progesterone levels can change by 1,000 times over the course of the ovarian cycle. Estrogen levels will change by multiples. Men just don't have that kind of volatility. Those female sex hormones do influence metabolism, but then it matters tremendously which phase she is in of her ovarian cycle. So if she is in the first follicular phase, which is a low progesterone, higher estrogen state.
What's the first follicular phase?
Yeah, so if you look at the female fertility phase, it is like a 200-piece orchestra. It is so dynamic, whereas men's fertility is like a barbershop quartet. It sounds nice, but it's very simple. So in the first phase, leading up, so she's just had her menstruation end. Now she's starting the beginning of a new cycle. That first phase is called the follicular phase, which is when her ovaries are having some follicles or a little egg getting bigger. One will end up becoming the dominant one, but that is creeping in higher levels of estrogen. And then she will ovulate. With the ovulation, that what was a follicle in her ovary now becomes what's called a yellow body or a corpus luteum. And so it's called the luteal phase. And that is defined by very high progesterone. And progesterone changes things. So where I think the conversation in women is very relevant and fascinating is that in the first phase, in her follicular phase, she is a fat-burning machine. You can measure. She will get into ketosis faster than her male counterpart, and she's burning more fat than her male counterpart. In fact, this is one of the few clinical values where there's a male version and a female version. This isn't very common. Many of the typical metabolic type markers, whether it's glucose or insulin, triglycerides, LDL cholesterol, they're the same across the sexes with the exception of free fatty acids. So earlier I had mentioned that when insulin is low, the fat cell is breaking down fat. It's breaking down that fat as free fatty acids. And so the free fatty acids in a woman are about 40 or 50% higher than in a man.
During that first phase?
Yes, especially during the first phase. And that's because she's burning more fat. And that helps her get into ketosis faster. So this has been shown in studies, take male and female, have them start a fast, she will get into ketosis faster than him. Now, during
that phase, or
especially during the phase, yeah. I don't know that they compared and controlled for the luteal phase, but it's worth noting where I think fasting and ketogenic diets start to change. So it'll keep going up. Yeah.
So just another reading. 0.8.
Yep.
Is ketosis considered 0.5?
Yeah, technically, but frankly, I actually call it ketosis at 0.3. The moment you can detect it on one of those blood meters, I'd say you're in ketosis. And I think 0.3 is the lower limit. So 0.5 is a little bit of an arbitrary cutoff, but that is the classic view. So in that luteal phase with high progesterone is a hunger hormone. And so if she's trying to do a fasting protocol and her cravings are going to be higher and she's going to be hungrier. And so that's where I think the conversation is very important, is that during her luteal phase, after she has ovulated, it's going to be harder to stick to a ketogenic diet. And that's where I think it might be prudent for her to be a little generous with herself, where it might get a little more difficult. Now, however, some of the concern with women and ketogenic diets is misplaced. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention a study that answered this question very well with regards to cortisol. In fact, I'll state this now. I already chatted with the team. I would love to see you bring on a scientist in the UK named Dr. Isabella Cooper. she has published a series of studies in women that are fascinating because of the intervention that she's done. She's taken women who had been adhering to a ketogenic diet as part of their normal life. Then for 21 days, they have to adopt a typical high-carb diet of the standard UK guidelines, similar to the US, about 55% carbohydrate, decidedly not ketogenic. For 21 days, so more than long enough to detect changes. And then they go back to their diet for 21 days and they have blood tests again. And so these are healthy women who go from a ketogenic diet to a high-carb diet back to a ketogenic diet. And when they looked at cortisol, when Isabella and her group measured cortisol levels, no statistically significant change at any point. There was just noise and no trend. Some gals had their cortisol go down, some had them go up, but as a group, it was just a big, messy, flat line.
And what does that mean?
That takes a lot of wind out of the sails of people who say that a ketogenic diet is a unique stress on women, because people want to invoke, and they'll say, well, cortisol goes through the roof, and that's a sign of a significant stress. And yet Isabella's own data show that cortisol levels aren't different, that there is no unique cortisol-related stress state of a ketogenic diet. So I think it's relevant because it just brings a little nuance to the conversation. Not to say men and women are not different. They absolutely are. But I do believe the view that a ketogenic diet is uniquely stressful in women but not men, I think is overblown. And again, I'm relying on Isabella's own data to support that.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.